Okay, so now that I've got some 3D things that I can start working with and setting up perspective views and looking at the lighting and rendering using 3ds Max, even before you've got any idea about your design, you can start setting this up, and then as you start putting in your design or changing it, you'll see those changes come through. So I've turned my massing off. I'm going to cancel that, and before I load this, I'm going to do a save as project, obviously, and give it a new name, because this is the name I'm going to work with from now on, and I want to keep that the same for the rest of the project. So I'm going to call it Redfern Proposed, and I'll call it V1, and that's the version I'll stick with if I can help it. Okay, so then as well as having the geometry and the lights set up, so that's really important. If you don't have any lighting or any objects to work with, then there's not much point doing this. But once you do have a couple of lights and also the sun, so I'll do the sun setup next. Just prior to that, though, I'm going to make a perspective view. Just making a camera. And I want to do a couple of views, but maybe I'll start looking from the entry there inwards. So I'm just going to click and point out on the footpath there, and or just near it, and then have that looking towards the building. And I'm going to take the camera target a fair way, because I want to make sure it includes all of these things in my view. So I'm going to take it right out so that the camera's targets most of the way into the building. And so there we are. So that's the view I'll have. I might just adjust the cropping there a little bit, so it's clear what we're looking at. So there's tidying up I can do. You can see there the floor really shouldn't be visible from the outside, but I can come back and adjust that later. So for now, I'm happy. I can see the entry through those doors, and that's the main thing. So I'll get the lights that I've put in there coming up when I start viewing these in Max, and that surface, yep, that'll be good. Maybe I'll bring that side to the right over a bit more, and yeah, that should work pretty well. Alright, so that's what I'm going to have when I start working in Max, but before I do the setup of that, I'm just going to do one last thing and get True North set up. So the site view that I have with the image, I can now use to set up True North as well. And that's a really good trick with Revit. Also with anything you bring in from Google Earth, that'll pick up True North for you. So if you're not sure what I mean, the side of this image here is basically pointing towards the top of the screen. That would have been vertical in the original image, and so that's True North. The side of that, either side, is pointing towards True North. And so I'm going to just copy that, copy to clipboard, and then I'll go to my True North view, and I'm just going to paste a line to current view. Okay, so I've got an exact copy of it, and then using on the Manage tab, under, what's that one called again? Project Location, I think. Yeah, Position, sorry. Under Position, you've got Rotate True North. So I can simply drag that base point onto the corner of my image, pick up the side, so that's my starting angle, and then snap so that the new angle is vertical. So what you want to see in your True North view is the image, the original image, being back at the angle that it started when you first brought it in. If I go back to Site with Image, you can see it's kept the original angle. And that's how it should be. So in here, the building is orthogonal, so that's at right angles, and that's how we want to work with it in all the views. Ground floor and all the others, it's still that way. But in True North, it's rotated, so the building's at an angle, but the image is is right. And that's really what that true north view does for you. It can be set to a different north to the other views. So that means if I go into the perspective view I've just made, 3D view A, I'll give that a better name, so I'm going to rename that, and I'll call that, it's the northeast entry. Yeah, we'll call it that. And if I go into my sun settings, then set it to still, and check the date and the time. I'm happy with that for now. I'm going to turn the ground plane off as well. And then OK, turn the shadows on, and now I'm getting shadows based on the real angles of the sun. So if I go back into sun settings now and adjust those, so I'll make it earlier in the day, and we'll see the shadows going to move around to the right. Later in the day, they move around to the left. So I'll go back to maybe an earlier time, and maybe we'll go for close to the equinox, which is going to give you the steepest angles you can. Maybe I can go even earlier. No, that's pushing it too far. So 9, maybe 8:30 I can go to. Oops. Let's just type that in. Yeah, no, too many shadows. I've got trees and things there, so got to watch out for those. And so instead I'll go for 9. That's okay. You just click on the little sun icon, and then yeah, at the top there. Sure. So so we can have a render with the sun, and we'll get a fair bit of light going into that interior. Most of it's in shadow though, but also remember we've got the lights in there, so that should give me some extra light. Okay, so then I'll well, this ceiling has some lights as well, but I might extend that afterwards. For now though, that's ready to go and load into Max. So as always, when you've got something you want to keep, save it before you do anything critical. And now on the main menu, I'm just going to go to Suite Workflows, and then here we go. Lucky I saved. Right, so that's an error. I'm going to say yes to save a recovery file, just in case. There's a good chance it won't actually close, but here we go. Yes again. So it'll try to terminate. There we go. Okay, it has crashed. That's common when you start doing things like this with Revit. It does overload it a little bit. Sorry, oh, you just click OK there, and then you can turn shadows on down the bottom. Down next to the sun. Yeah. That's it. Okay, so so there we are. That's all come back, and just make sure my true north is still set. Yep, that's all good. Okay, so I'll just try again. Suite Workflows, and then I'll start with an exterior rendering. So 3ds Max Design exterior rendering, and here you can just hit Run, and then we'll go for a new 3ds Max scene and just hit Continue. Yeah, so that's, I think you've got some trees in the way there. Yeah, that's all right. Okay, so you need to have 3ds Max installed on the computer you're working on for this to work. Yeah, yep. No, only Windows, same as Revit. Yeah. So on the main menu, just go to Suite Workflows, and then yeah, exterior for now. Yeah. Sure. Okay, so close any welcome screens that come up, and then you should see something like this with the model fully loaded. And as long as you set north properly in Revit, then it'll pick up the sun direction correctly for the southern hemisphere. And so you can see there the sun, you can already tell it's coming from the right place because that's north. It's coming from up here. You know straight away, if it's for the northern hemisphere, it'll be coming from down here, from the south. So that's working. And then I've right-clicked in the perspective view just to make sure it's active. If you get a menu like this and you don't know what to do with it, just right-click again and it'll go away. And then the best shortcut to remember there is C to set the camera view. So C sets camera to the active viewport. So I'll maximise that viewport now. Down in the bottom right corner, you have a toggle to do that. So click on the toggle again if you want to take it back to the 4 viewports. And exterior renders work pretty well without doing very much more than that. I'm just going to hit the render button, which is the teapot up in the top right corner, and it will do something. Because the sun is set up pretty well, you don't need to think that much about the lighting. You're working with interiors though, so lighting is important and we will need to go and adjust that. I'm recording this now. Yeah. Okay, so that's working. I'm not going to let it finish. I'll just cancel that because I want to do more with the interior. So the lights, if we go and find those, the lights are there, and you can see there if I go and zoom into the plan, I can select them, or in any of the other views. I've been right-clicking to change viewports, and when you right-click, you'll see those viewports will be highlighted with that yellow border, and then you can easily zoom and find the things you need. So again, I'll just select that, and we'll check in properties that it's coming up. Now it's not coming in with the correct lights. Okay, so I'm going to reload this. That's worked for the exterior, but I'm going to, I'm just going to reset and then not save, and I'll do it again, but with a couple of extra things that I know will help it. So I'm going to say yes to reset, and that's the best way. If you want to start a new file in Max, don't go to new, just use reset. And I'm going to go to, under customize, unit setup, and then system unit setup, and check that 1 unit equals 1 inches. Now in mine it is that already, but on your computers you'll probably need to check that. And then also metric for the display units and millimeters. Going back into Revit, this time I'll go to Suite Workflows and I'll do 3ds Max Design Interior Rendering. Run again, but then this time for the destination I'll choose active 3ds Max session, and then just choose, there's only one option there, but you have to choose it, untitled, because I haven't saved it. That's fine, continue, and it will bring it into that session I've already got. Okay, so it looks the same, but notice how this time it's got the lights, which you can see as these conical sort of objects. So again, I've right-clicked in the perspective view, C for camera to set the view, and I'm going to just select one of those lights and then go to the Modify tab, which over to the right you'll see is in the command panel. It's the second tab there. And I'll bring this panel down to see at the top that it's switched off. I've got to tick that on there to turn it on, and that will turn all of them on because they're instances. They're all like blocks or families, so they're the same thing, and turning one on will turn all of them on. I'll just click on the teapot to render that to show you what it's looking like at the moment. So it's still mainly showing the sunlight. The sun is very bright, and that is going to block out or make the interior lights not so visible. You can just see it there maybe. Okay, so again, I won't wait for that to finish though, I just want to show you. And then, okay, so to set this up for a nighttime render, I'm going to select the sun. And in the modify panel, I'll show you this way. You just go to setup down on the, under date, time and location, you'll find the setup button where you can adjust the date and the time. I'm just going to make the time there go to something that would be nighttime or early morning where you don't have any direct sun. And then before I do a render, I'm also going to go under the rendering menu to exposure control. And this might give you an idea where Max really pulls out ahead of Revit in the degree of exposure control you have. If you've done any photography, you'd have an idea why this is really important. Click render preview and you'll see basically how it will render, but it does it much more quickly than a render. So it's black. That's because it's still set up with the exposure for the sun. So for lower light scenarios, when you're taking a photograph, you let more light into the camera. Same idea here, lower the exposure value, and that's what it will do. So I go right down. There we are. Okay, so just the preview took a bit of time to update, but it is working there. Okay, so maybe about 4 or 5, around that. I'll go for 5. I don't mind if it's a little bit dark. And the nice thing in Max is you see it all in real time. Sometimes it takes a while for the graphics card to update, but that's not too bad. So you can see there, that's pretty close to what we see in the viewport. And so now if I render, it will use that exposure. And we can see then the interior lights, which is a nice thing. So that's the sort of setup you want. If you get that set up in the early stages of your project, then you can keep working away in Revit, and then as you make changes, adding more lights and changing the geometry, all those changes can get linked through to this file. So I'll do that next. So you can see here even the lights down the back are nice and clear along that wall there. You'll see in a minute. Okay, now trying to do this in Revit, I'd say it'd be almost impossible or very difficult anyway to get this sort of control over the lights and the exposure. And the render times will be a lot longer and just be more difficult generally. Okay, so I've seen enough. I'm going to cancel that for now. And then back into, well, firstly I'll save this Max file, so just using the main menu there, save as, and then I'll browse to where I've saved my file and give it a similar name to the other one, the Revit file. So it's important to realise this is a separate file. So you need to save it separately and make sure you manage it along with your Revit file. But now, again, I can go back into Revit. So just to make some simple changes, this floor is an important one. We don't want to see that edge outside the building. So back in the ground floor, I'm going to go to Edit Boundary and change this. I still want to see the step. Do you know if there's a ramp there in real life? Or is it just flat? Oh, right, so there is a step up there. Oh, right, and do you know if is it at the door or is it at the front of the building? It is, right, yeah. That's okay, that's normal, so that's what I'll do. And, okay, so we've got this edge here. I'm going to use pick lines to pick the back of this wall. But actually, before I do, I'll just see this line here. I want to bring that to the inside. So I'm going to use flip, and that'll flip all of the edges that are connected to it. I'll do that on the fire stair as well because that's a separate edge. So then going back to the front, now I've got to bring this part only out to the front of the building. And so, again, I'm going to use pick lines here instead of pick walls because I used pick walls in the first place to make this line. If I go to use pick walls again, it'll just try to choose that same edge. I can't pick the outside and the inside of the wall at the same time. So you can't use pick walls always, and if it's not working, just use pick lines. And so I can pick the front there and also the insides of the opening. And then split element to break that line so that I can then use trim and get my step. So that's probably how you should have the ground floor so that the walls can go outside it. Right, so tick to finish. Actually, sorry, I'll do the other part as well while I'm at it. I might make it a bit clearer as well. So I'll just pick this outer edge. Don't worry about messages like that. If you know what you're doing, it's fine. And then again, split, trim. There we are. And so then the same here. So this is quite common. You need to do this with most thresholds. Think about how that floor is going to change at the opening. That's normally where they misbehave. All right, so there we are. Now here, sorry, I haven't split this one yet, so that's really important before trimming it, because you want to try and keep the original edge instead of trying to add new edges where you can. So it's better to split it and then trim afterwards. So I've got all those little projections there. They're basically wherever there's an entry or a threshold, you'll have that issue. Back into the 3D view, and I can see then where the walls need to be brought down. Oops, it's gone out of Revit. Don't crash, please. Okay, great. Okay, going to save my file. And then okay, so these exterior walls, the one at the entry especially, but really all the walls that run around the outside of the building, including the piers, can be brought down at least 50 mil. So here I'm just using control to select them. Right, so you probably have to orbit and change your view to be able to see all of those things properly. Okay, so again, just with control, selecting those, back as well, and now there's a wall at the top, but that's not the wall that touches the ground. There's another one underneath. To get to it, let's see, I probably have to go to a section view. There we are. Okay, so there's the wall that I want. And you can see in there maybe a bit more clearly why I need to bring this down. So it's 50 mil above the ground. So if I bring it down 50 mil, the wall's going to touch the ground. but the other walls I've brought down even further. And so that is, I think, about 200. So I'm going to go minus 250 for the base offset, and that'll bring the bottom of these walls down. Don't worry if you get a message like this, just okay. And there we are, that's down far enough. Back to the 3D view, and all the walls now should be grounded. Okay, there we are. So you can see then everything's going to the ground or past it. Now we've got overlapping geometry there. So that floor is overlapping with the wall. So a good trick there is to try join geometry. So I'm going to choose that wall and the floor, and that will tidy it up. So then the floor will take precedence over the wall, in other words. Looking in the section view, should be able to see that pretty clearly. Well, that part has the wall, but I've got a section that goes through the entry there. No, I don't, but I'll just assume that it's okay based on the 3D view. So I'm going to go back then to my northeast entry view, save the file, go to Suite Workflows, and again 3ds Max Design Interior Rendering, run, and this time again active 3ds Max session, choose the file I have open, continue. Okay, so again I've got to set the camera view to the viewport, and give it a minute to update the display. This real-time lighting is pretty intensive on the computer, so it takes a minute sometimes. It'll get there. I'll click Render Preview just while that's happening. Oh, it's taken my sun back to the same angle. So that's gone super bright. That's what should happen because my sun is set to the angle or the time that I had in Revit. So I've got to take that back to the earlier time, which was I think 2 in the morning. 1 or 2 is going to be the same thing pretty much. And then back to the render exposure control under the rendering menu, render preview. And then, okay, so it's taken the time to what I wanted, but then the lights as well also need to be turned back on because again in Revit they're switched off. So I'll turn it on just in here, and now again, render preview. There we go. Okay, so it's back to the way it was, but with the changes, this viewport will update in a minute. There we are, it's going now. And so again there you can hopefully see that it's brought those changes through with the wall going down to the footpath, but then the floor just in that threshold area, which is a bit hard to see now, but it will be there in a second. Let's try maximising that and it should fix it. A bit slow sometimes, these computers. There it goes. Okay, so even with these computers, which have pretty good graphics cards, it can be a slow old process waiting for the viewports to update. So a good trick there sometimes is just to set the view instead of having it on realistic, like same as Revit. You can right click on that shading mode, realistic, and go to shaded, which is going to turn the lighting off. I'll also just right click there again and check, yep, the lighting's off. So then you can see really clearly that it's brought that change in with the new wall, or the change to the wall. All right, so maybe I'll just repeat that with another. Yeah, we've got time. Another quick change. So you might want a different view to bring in a different camera. At the moment, it's just got the one camera view, and that's, I suppose, one of the important things to realise when you're working with this linked workflow, that it only does bring the one camera across to begin with, but there's a trick to get extra cameras. I'm going to go to ground floor again, and then I'll just make a new camera view. This time I'll make it inside, basically just looking down in that same area. Stretch it out a bit, see a bit more. Okay, maybe bring that out a bit further. Okay, so this is my new view, which I will give a new name. So rename, and I'll call this reception. There we are. Really important that you set the sun settings to still and make sure it picks up the location, Sydney. Turn the ground plane off as well. Save file. And then now if I go back to Suite Workflows, and again 3ds Max Design interior rendering, run, and then simply choose again Active Max Session, choose the one that's open, continue, and when it's done importing, you'll see that it'll keep the camera view you started with, so there's my northeast entry, but it's going to add the new camera. So if I type C, it'll now give me a choice of the different cameras I've loaded. So it's got the 3D view reception, okay, and there's the new view. So I can again go to rendering, exposure control, do a render preview, and we'll see all those things that I haven't changed yet. The sun will still be on and the lights will be off, but that's okay, it's good to see that. It's going a bit slowly, but it should be done any second. If it doesn't crash. There we are. Okay, so you can see then, we can see something, mainly because of the, oh no, it's brought a new sun in. Okay, that's a bit annoying. And it may have brought duplicates of the lights. Don't tell me it's not updated things. It should have updated everything. Still a bit touchy sometimes, this this approach. It's duplicated everything. What a stupid program it is sometimes. Okay, maybe I'll just open, don't save, and open my file again as it was. Might have to just check my settings and make sure it's updating. So you've got to watch out for that. If it brings in a duplicate of everything, you're going to have 2 times every object in your scene, which is not really not a good thing. Okay, so this is back to the one that I'd before I'd saved it. So let's have a look if I just go and do that again. Let's make sure it's got the right name. Okay, so back here, Suite Workflows, interior rendering. I'm going to check my settings this time. And okay, so you can turn the lights off. Sometimes that's the easiest option. Just turn all of the lighting options off, but leave the camera on. So the lights and the daylight systems are the 2 main ones to leave off. if they're causing problems. And everything else should be fine. So if I hit run, go to active 3ds Max session, choose the file, and here I'm going to choose will be removed and replaced. Continue. There we go. So there we are. So that's brought the change in, but this time it's kept the lights as they were and the sun as it was, and just as importantly, it hasn't brought duplicates of all my walls and floors and everything else, which is a real problem if you don't watch out for that. Okay, so I'm just checking here. There should be 2 things there. Let's just see. So to make sure, where's something that's easy to check? There we go, that's a wall. No. So I'm just checking this surface there to make sure there aren't 2. I think it may have duplicates already, but I'll have to have a look at that. Anyhow, I'm just going to exit end isolation, so right-click end isolation, and we'll have to have a look at that again, but it's otherwise going to work pretty well. So if I go to C, there you've got at least the new camera, that's better, and rendering, that should work pretty well. Okay, so to check all of that, on the main menu, just to finish off, if you go to References and then Manage Links, on the Files tab, oh, you can see there. Okay, so it has brought them in as 2 separate links, which it shouldn't have, but because I've changed the name, it's confused it a bit, and it does use the camera name, so I'm simply going to remove the northeast entry, which is the original file. So I'm just going to go to Attach there. Yes. Close this, and now it should have just 1 copy. And of course it's lost the lights. So let's go back in. Now, just to make it a bit clearer, because I was doing it in a confusing way then, I'll go back to one last time, 3ds Max Design Interior Rendering. Go to Settings. Yep, lights and daylight system I've got on this time. Run. Here will be removed and replaced. And then for the top option, Active 3ds Max Session, choose the file, continue. There we go. So just checking under References, Manage Links. There we go. So there's just the 1 link there, which is really important. But I still have to manually just go and choose a light, turn them on. Sun, back to, what was it, 1 o'clock. Or 2, oh, that's fine. C for camera to set the viewport, rendering, exposure control, check that, do a render preview, and it should be working again. Okay, so I know it can seem like a lot of work just to change the camera view, but at the moment that's the only way to do it. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's it. If you just have a few goes at it, especially when the files are pretty simple. It's a lot easier. Once you get big files, you're waiting half an hour sometimes just for this link to happen, and that's painful. We had a 400 meg Revit file last semester, and it took more than an hour just to link, which is ridiculous. Okay, so there we are. That's already, I think, going to work. You can see pretty well. You can see the lighting there. You can see it here as well. So if I click the teapot to render, again, that's working. And that's half the battle. After that, if you're just changing geometry, putting in new objects, even putting in new lights, it'll work pretty well. But watch out for new cameras. Probably it's good just to, if you can, get a camera that you're happy with to start with, and then you can easily make new cameras in Max, which work more like real life cameras. So there's my interior camera. If I wanted to have one from the outside again, I can just go to the Create tab, click on Cameras and Target, click and drag to make a camera, just like Revit. And then it's a good way of getting used to the editing tools in Max. It's a lot like the mouse thing I've just been showing you. So you get these gizmos. So I can use that to lift the camera up. Again, C will set the camera to the viewport. And, well, I'll maybe just bring that target up again, which you can get on the right-click menu. There we go. So back to exposure control and render preview, and it will now show the exterior camera. There we go. Okay, so again, if I do a full render, that's what it will give me. Okay, so remember, these are still just draft renders for Max. This is low quality. In Revit it would be about medium, I suppose. Oh, beyond that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But even this isn't too bad. You can get a pretty good idea of all the geometry. And notice I haven't done anything yet with the materials. These materials are coming from Revit. So you can do most of the initial setup of your materials that way in Revit, get them into Max, and then you can adjust them further. Yeah. Oh no, everything, every aspect you can change, and a lot more than you can in Revit. So especially if you have glowing materials or translucent materials, things that have a lot of texture, anything that's complicated can be difficult in Max. Oh, sorry, in Revit I mean, but in Max, anything's possible. Right, so there I can really start to get an idea at least what needs to change. So maybe just to finish up, I know I said I'd finish up before, but it's good for you to see maybe a bit more of the reasons for using Max. And so I'll go to shaded in this viewport, which is left at the moment. Right click where it says left and change it to right, which is looking at the front of my building. And on the Shapes tab, I'm going to go to Text, and let's see, we've got Max Text. Have you got a name for the space, or for the Redfern? Okay, so is it going to be a gallery or a museum still, or? Right. So. Right. Okay. Well, let's say let's call it something. So, and I've done. Okay. So, you can do 3D text and things like that a lot more easily in 3ds Max than you can in Revit. So I've just done that, just put some text on there, and it's hard to see because it doesn't have any depth yet. So I'll go to wireframe and then should be able to see it. Maybe like, it's just probably very big. There it is. So you can see the text there. It's just not a very good colour, so I'll make that maybe blue and bring the size down. Change this to shaded, and then I've just got to give it a height, so I can extrude that. Give it a bit of height. Maybe change the font to, let's say, Calibri or something, or Calibri. Yep. Okay, so I've got my text there, and I can make that neon. So this is the material editor in 3ds Max. It's the big sphere on the main toolbar, and then using the compact material editor on the menu there, I'm just going to choose the glass materials, and I'll go and get one from the library so I don't have to do all the setup. So clicking on that little sphere there to get material, you've got the same material library as in Revit, but with a bit more. So the Odd Death material library here, and in miscellaneous, is it? No, sorry. It's in which folder? So actually, is it in glass? Yeah, here we are, glass, and you have these self-illuminated materials pre-made. So I'll just go for luminous translucent orange, that should be alright. And assign it to the selection, render, and that should work pretty well. There we go. It's a bit too bright maybe, so I'll turn that down. Yeah, yep. So so here we've got the self-illumination. That's very bright at the moment, so I'll take that down to say 100. Maybe that's not bright enough. Maybe 3. No, too much. Okay, so let's just try that again. Okay, still a little bit too bright. But, you know, if you try this in Revit, you'll see it's far, far more difficult. So let's try 100, render. Okay, you can tell it's getting closer. Cancel, and I'll take it back to, let's try 30, render. There we go, getting close to what I want. Okay, so notice how even, might be hard to see on the projector, I can definitely see it on my screen, even little things like the lighting that is getting picked up now on the building from the text, from that illuminated text, it's lighting other things up. You can, yeah, you've got model text. Yeah, it works pretty similar to this. But then once you start putting materials onto it, it works, but you just don't have the control that you get in Max. And so you'll see as this renders, you know, we can already see a bit of lighting on the moulding there, but around the wall, it's going to glow, and it's going to come from the text and look real, not just a a bright bit of text. Yeah, it's an amazing program once you get into it, but because the real world's complicated and the way light works in the real world is pretty complex, you have to sometimes think about lots of different things. And so you can see it knows to avoid the text when it does these buckets. So these little things that come up, they're based on the number of processor cores you've got in your computer. And it knows to avoid the hard bits. So it's going for all the easy bits first, and there we go, now it's doing a bit of text. You'll start to see it's maybe a bit too bright still, but it's not far off. There we go. Okay, so you don't need to take it this far at this stage, but if you start thinking about these things, try to set up as much as you can, then as you put more complexity into your designs, it will be easier when you get to this stage. So I'll just let that finish, and then I'll finish the recording there, definitely. Done. Okay, so I'll finish